The roar of engines split the humid Lagos night as Amara Okoye sprinted across the rooftop of the abandoned warehouse. Her boots thudded against the metal, the sound echoing through the empty docks below. She had no time to hesitate. Behind her, two men, armed, relentless, and clearly expecting her, climbed the rusted stairwell with a predator's precision. Her heart pounded, but her breathing was steady. Years of Nigerian intelligence training had prepared her for moments like this. She vaulted over the edge, landing with barely a grunt, and slid into a shadowed alley. Her hand instinctively checked the small pistol at her waist, but she knew she couldn't waste a bullet unless absolutely necessary. The mission wasn't about killing, it was about infiltration, precision, and surviving long enough to get close to the target. Above, the distant sound of a helicopter broke the night's rhythm. Her handler's voice crackled through the earpiece, calm but insistent. "Amara, get moving. Extraction team is compromised. This is no drill." Amara's lips pressed into a thin line. "Understood," she whispered, almost to herself. She darted past crates, stacked high with shipping containers, the smell of salt water and diesel mixing with the faint tang of fear. Each step brought her closer to the plane that would take her to Seoul, a city she knew only from briefings and surveillance photos, a city where her next target, Kang Minho, ruled an empire built on fear, power, and ruthless efficiency. She paused at the edge of the harbor, glancing back. Two men were running toward the shadows she had just left, shouting in a language she recognized but didn't need to understand. Without hesitation, she launched herself into the water, disappearing beneath the waves. Her lungs burned, her arms ached, but adrenaline carried her toward the faint light of the extraction point. By the time she climbed onto the speedboat waiting for her, her mind had shifted from survival to strategy. Kang Minho was more than a Mafia kingpin. He was the reason the International Tribunal had requested her presence. And now she was part of the setup, a setup that, unbeknownst to her, had been orchestrated long before she ever stepped foot in Seoul. The flight was quiet, almost serene as she sat in the private jet, reviewing the dossier again. Minho, 33 years old, controlling over 70% of Seoul's underground operations, arms dealing, money laundering, human trafficking, an empire that no one outside the city could fully comprehend. Her mission: infiltrate, gather evidence, and dismantle his network from the inside. Easy in theory, dangerous in practice. A knock on the cabin door snapped her back to reality. The flight attendant, actually another agent in disguise, handed her a cup of tea. "For focus," the woman said, her eyes briefly flicking to the dossier Amara had left open. No words needed, both women understood the stakes. As the plane began its descent, Amara allowed herself a single thought. This wasn't just a mission. Her mother's medical treatment depended on it. The weight of that reality pressed down on her chest as Seoul's sprawling skyline appeared beneath the clouds. Neon lights reflected on the Han River, glittering like 1,000 tiny promises of danger. She landed in Seoul under the cover of night, stepping into a city that was foreign in language, familiar in danger. Her first assignment: attend a charity auction where Minho would be present. The dossier described the event as a gala, wealthy elites, politicians, and corporate figures mingling under crystal chandeliers. For her, it was a battlefield dressed in silk and champagne. From the moment she entered the grand hall, her senses sharpened. Men in tailored suits and women in glittering gowns moved like predators in a jungle of civility. She could feel Minho before she saw him, calculated, commanding, the kind of presence that drew the eyes of everyone in the room without effort. And then she saw him. Kang Minho was taller than she expected, his posture impossibly straight, every movement precise. His dark eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on her, a flicker of recognition or suspicion passed over his features. He didn't approach immediately. He watched, he assessed. He was not a man who wasted attention. Amara smiled politely at passing guests, but her mind raced. She had to make contact without raising suspicion, find a way to be noticed without being identified. Kang Minho approached the auction stage, shaking hands with dignitaries, his charisma radiating like a low-burning fire. Then he looked at her directly. The world seemed to narrow. "You're new," he said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of a challenge. It wasn't a question. Amara met his gaze, heart steady. "Yes, from Nigeria," she answered, keeping her tone neutral, professional, every syllable measured. "Interesting," he said, almost to himself. Then, with a slight smile, he moved along, leaving her with a thrill of awareness she had never expected. The room felt suddenly smaller, the conversation around her hollow. She was not used to being noticed, certainly not in this way. The auction proceeded, but every glance, every movement was a silent dialogue between them. Amara knew Minho was testing her. She could feel it in the subtle way he observed, in the slight tilt of his head, in the quick calculation in his eyes. She had to play the part, refined, polite, unthreatening, while remaining alert to every possible danger. During a pause in the auction, she slipped away to the terrace overlooking the city. The night air was cold, a stark contrast to the heated ballroom. Her earpiece buzzed. "Amara, remember your priority. Gather intel, maintain cover," Morrison's voice reminded her. A flicker of irritation crossed her face. Even in Seoul, even in the midst of chaos, her handler's presence was a tether she could not cut. Then a hand on her shoulder startled her. She turned. Minho stood there, his expression unreadable. "You don't belong here," he said, not accusatory, just stating a fact. "I'm here for the same reason as everyone else," she replied smoothly, masking the tension that flickered across her chest. He smiled faintly, a dangerous curve of lips. "Careful," he warned. "In my world, people don't get second chances." Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the unexpected electricity in the air between them. The man was dangerous, brilliant, and utterly in control. And somehow, inexplicably, he had noticed her, not just her presence, but something deeper, a glimmer of the truth beneath her polished exterior. A sudden commotion at the auction drew their attention, an argument, voices raised, a glass shattering somewhere in the hall. Minho's eyes narrowed. "Stay close," he murmured, almost a command. She nodded, silently accepting that for the moment proximity was her only protection. Later, as the gala wound down, she found herself alone in a quiet corridor, Minho appearing seemingly from nowhere. "You intrigued me," he said, his voice low. "Tell me, what is your purpose here?" Amara smiled faintly, a hint of irony in her tone. "I'm here to observe, as everyone is, perhaps even to enjoy the night." He leaned closer, almost brushing her arm. "Be careful what you enjoy," he warned, voice dropping. The tension was palpable. This was not just a meeting of two people, it was a collision of worlds, of cultures, of intentions. Amara knew she had to tread carefully. One misstep, one misjudgment, and the mission and her life could end here. As she left the gala, blending into the night streets of Seoul, she allowed herself a fleeting thought. This man, Kang Minho, would be the most dangerous and the most fascinating part of her life, and perhaps the one she couldn't afford to underestimate. Her earpiece buzzed again. "Mission ongoing. Keep your cover." She smiled only slightly, knowing that the real game had only just begun. And before the next steps could unfold, she whispered to herself, almost in defiance, "Let's see who survives." Amara navigated the sleek corridors of Minho's luxury apartment building, every step measured, every glance calculated. Security cameras tracked her movements, and yet she had to appear natural, as if she belonged. The apartment itself was a fortress disguised as opulence, modern art on the walls, muted lighting, and a faint scent of sandalwood. It was elegant, but every detail screamed control. Kang Minho was a man who liked to see everything, know everything, anticipate everything. She paused near the elevator, pretending to adjust her sleeve, and caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. Her eyes, sharp and alert, betrayed nothing of her inner calculations. Tonight, she had to meet Minho formally, not just in passing like at the gala. She had to earn his attention, but without triggering suspicion. The elevator dinged, the doors slid open. He was there, as if materializing from the shadows. His presence filled the small space, his dark eyes assessing her from head to toe. "You seem comfortable," he said smoothly, voice low, carrying that same dangerous weight from the gala. "I've adapted quickly," Amara replied evenly. She could feel the tension crackling, thickening the air between them. Kang Minho's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "I like people who adapt. The others, they crumble." His gaze lingered for a heartbeat too long. "Tell me," he said, lowering his voice, "what is your true purpose here?" Amara's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the challenge in his tone. "I observe, I learn, I stay out of trouble." She smiled faintly, letting just enough charm slip through to maintain her cover. "Observation can be dangerous," he warned, stepping closer, so close she could feel the subtle heat radiating from him. "Sometimes you see too much, sometimes it sees you back." The elevator chimed, doors opening on the penthouse floor. He didn't move away. Amara felt trapped, yet oddly in control. Every move had meaning, every word carried weight. The penthouse was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the neon-drenched city below. Minho gestured to a chair. "Sit," he commanded, calm but insistent. Amara hesitated only briefly, then lowered herself gracefully. "You do things your way," she observed, her voice steady. "That's impressive." "He does what works," he said simply, watching her, calculating. Then, almost imperceptibly, his tone shifted. "But rules exist for a reason, and sometimes people break them." Amara studied him, intrigued. She had trained for years to read dangerous men, to anticipate moves, to survive encounters like this. But Kang Minho was unlike anyone she had ever faced. His intelligence, his dominance, and his subtlety created a tension she couldn't ignore. He stepped around the room, inspecting the space as if testing her awareness. "You notice things," he said. "That's good. Most people don't. Most people only see what I want them to see." "I notice what I need to," Amara replied, careful not to give away her own awareness, "and I act only when necessary." Kang Minho's eyes narrowed slightly, as if evaluating whether she spoke the truth. Then he approached again, stopping just behind her chair. "Be careful," he murmured. "In my world, mistakes are expensive." Amara nodded, masking the slight thrill running through her. There was a dangerous magnetism to this man, and she needed to acknowledge it without faltering. Every word, every gesture could determine the difference between survival and disaster. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it briefly, then back at her. "Trouble," he said simply. "An employee tried to embezzle funds. We'll handle it." Before she could respond, two men entered the penthouse, a flurry of suits and muscle. They moved with precise coordination, a silent threat in every step. Minho's presence alone commanded control. The men were extensions of him, instruments of his will. Amara's heart raced, but her focus remained sharp. This was her chance to observe the inner workings of his empire firsthand. She could see how authority flowed, how loyalty was enforced, and how fear mingled with respect in ways that she had only read about in dossiers. Minho motioned her to stand. "You'll stay with me for a while," he said, "not because I need protection, but because I want to see how you handle pressure." Amara's lips pressed together. This was more than a test. It was a challenge, one she had to meet without revealing her agenda. She nodded subtly, knowing that any hesitation could tip the scales. The next few days were a dance of observation, manipulation, and subtle confrontation. Minho allowed her proximity, but never let her feel secure. He introduced her to his inner circle, each interaction layered with veiled tests and psychological pressure. Amara took careful notes, mentally cataloging every interaction, every detail. Late one night, as she was reviewing reports, Minho entered the office silently. "You work hard," he said. "I like that, but don't let it make you predictable." She glanced up, meeting his gaze evenly. "I don't make mistakes." "Everyone makes mistakes," he countered, leaning casually against the desk. "The difference is knowing when you've been seen." Amara's mind raced. He was testing her, probing for weakness, but beneath the tension, there was an undeniable connection, a friction that neither could ignore. Days later, Minho invited her to his private gym. "You need to understand strength," he said simply, "not just physical but control, the ability to dominate and protect." As they sparred, the contact was minimal, but the tension was palpable. Every movement, every feint, every glance carried unspoken meaning. Amara was trained, disciplined, and focused, but Minho's presence unsettled her in ways she hadn't anticipated. "You're more dangerous than I expected," he said quietly, observing her closely, "and yet you hide it well." Amara caught her breath, meeting his gaze. "Dangerous can be relative," she replied. "Depends on who's observing." He smiled faintly, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips. "Careful, you might be teaching me something." That night, after training, Minho escorted her back to her temporary residence, a luxury suite arranged by his team. The ride was silent, except for the hum of the engine. Both were lost in thought, the unspoken tension filling the space. Before stepping out, he paused. "You came here for a mission, but understand this. This city, this world, they change people, sometimes faster than they expect." Amara stepped down from the car, steadying herself. "I adapt," she said, the word carrying both defiance and truth. He watched her walk away, the streetlights catching the sharp lines of her face. There was a long pause before he finally muttered, almost to himself, "Interesting." By the next morning, Amara realized something she hadn't anticipated. This wasn't just about surveillance, strategy, or gathering evidence. Minho was more than a target. He was a force, magnetic and terrifying, pulling her into a world she had trained to resist, but was increasingly tempted to embrace. And with that thought, she remembered the words of her handler, Morrison, "Stay focused, your life and your mother's depend on it." Her mind raced as she prepared for the evening ahead. Minho had scheduled a private meeting, and the stakes had escalated. She couldn't yet tell if it was an opportunity or a trap, but one thing was certain: she would not leave Seoul the same person who arrived. The night air in Seoul was crisp, carrying a distant hum of traffic and the faint scent of rain on asphalt. Amara walked the streets toward Minho's penthouse, her mind a storm of calculation, anticipation, and an unbidden spark of curiosity. She knew the night would change everything, though she didn't yet know how deeply. The lobby was empty except for the usual security presence, nodding politely but alert. Minho's assistant escorted her without a word, leading her through the winding corridors of the penthouse suite. She tried to mask the rapid pulse against her ribs, though she knew he would notice if it were faster than usual. Minho had eyes everywhere, sometimes unseen, sometimes frighteningly intimate. The door opened. He was there, leaning casually against the frame, his dark suit impeccable, his expression unreadable. "You're on time," he remarked, his tone half approval, half challenge. "I wouldn't want to disappoint," Amara replied smoothly, keeping her voice neutral. He stepped aside. "Good, come in." The suite was lavish, yet it carried the air of strategic control. Minimalist furniture, walls lined with expensive art, but every item placed to serve a purpose, whether for comfort, display, or surveillance. Amara allowed herself a measured scan, noting every camera, every exit, every angle. She knew she couldn't afford to make a mistake. "Sit," he said, motioning toward the large sofa. She complied, keeping her posture relaxed. Her mind, however, was racing. She'd been trained to stay alert, to read body language, to anticipate threats, and Kang Minho tested all of it without even speaking directly. Minutes passed in silence, a quiet tension stretching like a taut wire between them. Then he spoke, low and deliberate. "You're good at hiding, but I can see things about you others miss." Amara lifted an eyebrow. "I've been trained for that." "I can tell," he replied, almost as if the acknowledgement was a challenge. "But hiding isn't enough. Sometimes the truth finds a way out, and sometimes the truth isn't yours to control." She swallowed, her pulse quickening, not from fear, but from the awareness that this man saw more than he should. And yet she felt an inexplicable pull, a dangerous intrigue that she knew she had to resist. Suddenly he moved closer, the air charged with unspoken tension. "You're in my world now," he murmured. "One misstep and you won't just fail your mission, you'll fail yourself." Amara met his gaze evenly, refusing to show hesitation. "I've survived worse." He smirked faintly, his eyes narrowing. "Have you?" Before she could answer, he grabbed her hand and pressed it gently against the edge of a table. "Insurance," he said simply, producing a pair of cuffs. Her stomach dropped, not with fear, but with awareness. He wasn't cruel, he was precise. Every action measured, every gesture intentional. "You won't need these," he continued, though the cuffs remained in his hand, "unless I decide it's necessary." Her pulse quickened. "Necessary for what?" "To ensure cooperation," he said quietly, his eyes locking with hers. "You're here for your mission, yes, but you also have personal priorities, correct? Your mother." Amara stiffened imperceptibly, but nodded. "Yes." "I can help," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Medical treatment, funding, protection, but I need your agreement." Her eyes narrowed. "Agreement to what?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Cooperation," he said simply. "You follow my rules, you stay alive, your mother gets what she needs, and in return, you assist me indirectly." The offer was clear, practical, and dangerous. She weighed it quickly. Her mother's health, the mission, her own survival. Everything pointed to a yes, but it came with a cost: trust, compliance, and an emotional vulnerability she had never anticipated. "I'll consider it," she said, keeping her tone professional, but her mind was already calculating, adjusting to the sudden escalation of stakes. Minho tilted his head slightly, studying her reaction. "Consider quickly," he said, then leaned back, "because hesitation is expensive." Over the next hours, conversation turned into an intricate dance of psychological sparring. They talked about strategy, observations, and subtle manipulations. Amara tested his limits, subtly pushing boundaries, gauging his reactions. Minho observed, teased, and occasionally provoked, keeping the tension high, the stakes uncomfortably intimate. "You think you understand me," he said at one point, leaning against the window, arms crossed. "But understanding is different from surviving." "I survive," she countered, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "And I adapt." His eyes darkened, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his features. "Adapting is only the beginning," he said, then stepped closer. "Control, though, control is what keeps you alive." Amara's mind raced. Every word, every move, every glance held multiple meanings. She couldn't afford to falter, but she could feel the pull, the magnetism, the dangerous allure of a man who could read her as easily as she tried to read him. The night deepened, the city lights casting shadows across the room. Minho's hand brushed against hers accidentally, or not. "I can be generous," he said softly, "but generosity is measured in obedience." Amara inhaled sharply. Her training had prepared her for combat, strategy, and evasion, but it had never prepared her for the subtle psychological warfare of intimacy and trust, combined with the stakes of life and family. Then he did something unexpected. He offered her a glass of wine, poured carefully, and handed it to her. "To survival," he said. "To survival," she echoed, the words tasting heavier than the wine itself. Minutes passed in quiet shared acknowledgement of danger and unspoken understanding. The tension between them was no longer just about mission parameters, it was about connection, desire, and trust, or the careful illusion of it. Finally, Minho produced the cuffs again. "This is symbolic," he said quietly. "You stay because you choose to, but remember, your cooperation ensures both our worlds remain intact." Amara's eyes met his. She knew she was entering a territory where mission and emotion would collide, where trust and strategy would become inseparable. And yet, somewhere deep, she recognized the truth. Her survival, her mother's future, and perhaps her own emotional awakening were now inextricably linked to Kang Minho. As the night ended, she left the penthouse with a mind racing, heart unsettled, and resolve sharpened. The first step of true cooperation had been taken, not by her will alone, but by the unspoken, dangerous magnetism of a man who ruled Seoul's underworld, and it seems, the edges of her own heart. Amara sat in the dim glow of her temporary apartment, her mind spinning with the events of the previous night. The handcuffs, the deal, the subtle power play, it was all too much to process at once. She replayed Minho's words over and over, analyzing every syllable, every glance, every pause. Cooperation was one thing, desire another, but the lines were already blurring, and she hated that she could feel it. Her earpiece buzzed, sharp and insistent. "Amara," Morrison's voice came through, calm but with a tension that made her uneasy. "We have a problem." She straightened. "Go on." "Your mother. She's been targeted. Someone knows about her condition. Be careful. It's connected to Minho's operations, but it's complicated." Amara's stomach twisted. "How? Who?" "Don't ask questions. Just trust me, and trust Minho for now. He's protecting her in ways you don't yet understand." Her hands clenched into fists. Trust was a word she rarely used, and now she was being asked to place it in a man whose world was built on control and fear. By the time she arrived at Minho's penthouse that evening, the tension was palpable. He met her at the door, expression unreadable. "Your mother is safe," he said simply, his eyes locking on hers. "But don't misunderstand, her safety depends on your decisions here." Her heart ached. Relief, guilt, frustration, they collided violently. "I understand," she said, her voice steady though her mind whirled. "I'll cooperate." "Good," he replied, his tone neutral, almost casual, but the slight curve of his lips hinted at an unreadable emotion, something beneath the surface that she couldn't yet interpret. The days that followed were a careful balance of observation and action. Minho allowed her access to his operations, testing her intelligence and resolve, while keeping her close enough to monitor her reactions. Every task, every instruction carried multiple layers. Every gesture he made was both a test and an invitation. One night, she discovered a hidden file on Minho's private network, a dossier on Morrison. Her blood ran cold. The evidence was undeniable. Her handler was Minho's informant. Everything she had trusted, everything she had believed was a setup. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the documents. Morrison had orchestrated her mission from the start, ensuring she would be drawn into Minho's orbit. Her mission, her purpose, even her trust, it had all been manipulated. When Minho noticed her tension, he approached silently. "I see you found something," he said, calm, measured. "Curiosity can be dangerous." I knew something didn't add up," Amara admitted, voice tight. "Morrison, he's working with you. He's been manipulating me." Minho's gaze sharpened. "And how does that make you feel?" "Betrayed," she said simply, though her tone carried layers of anger, frustration, and confusion. "Good," he murmured, leaning closer. "Betrayal is part of life in this world. You can feel it, or you can ignore it, but understanding it gives you power." Amara swallowed, the emotional weight pressing down on her. The mission had become personal. Her trust, her loyalty, her heart, they were all in the crossfire of a dangerous game she had barely begun to understand. Later that evening, her worst fears were realized. She received a cryptic message: "Mother has been taken. Comply or lose everything." Her heart froze. Every step she had taken, every decision she had made had led to this moment. Without hesitation, she called Minho. "She's been kidnapped," she said, voice tight. "I need your help." His expression darkened. "I'll get her back," he said firmly, "but you must trust me completely. Your hesitation will cost her." Within hours, Minho mobilized his team. Sleep cars moved through the city, armed men coordinated via encrypted channels, every movement precise and calculated. Amara followed, tense and alert, every muscle ready, every thought racing. They arrived at the warehouse where her mother was being held. The place reeked of danger: dark corners, armed guards, the faint sound of movement echoing off concrete walls. Minho's eyes swept over the scene, calculating, commanding, every decision deliberate. "Stay close," he said, voice low yet carrying authority that left no room for argument. The assault began. Minho's team moved with lethal efficiency, neutralizing guards silently, swiftly. Amara's instincts kicked in. She assisted where she could, her training allowing her to anticipate attacks, disarm threats, and protect herself. Yet every moment was layered with danger. One wrong move, one misstep, and her mother's life, and her own, would be over. Through the chaos, Minho stayed close to her, guiding, protecting, commanding. There was no tenderness yet, no softness, only control and precision, but it was undeniable. He would stop at nothing to ensure success. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the building fell silent. The guards were incapacitated or fled. Her mother emerged, trembling but unharmed. Amara ran to her, relief flooding through her, and embraced her tightly. Minho watched from a distance, his eyes shadowed. When Amara finally turned to him, there was no gratitude in her gaze, only a mixture of exhaustion, fear, and reluctant acknowledgement. "You see now," he said quietly, approaching, "that in my world, hesitation can cost everything. Loyalty, trust, survival. Choose carefully." Amara's chest heaved. "I understand," she said, the words heavy with new meaning. "But this was more than I expected." Minho's gaze softened, just for a moment, but it was enough to send a shiver through her. He handed her a small envelope. "For your mother, medical treatment, no questions asked. But remember, your choices have consequences." The weight of the evening pressed down on her. Betrayal, danger, relief, and unanticipated attraction collided in her chest. She had survived, but nothing would ever be the same. Over the following days, she noticed subtle changes. Minho's attention sharpened, his tests became more nuanced, and their interactions carried a tension that was no longer strictly professional. Each glance, each word, each touch was layered with complexity. The emotional stakes had escalated far beyond strategy. Amara found herself both resisting and drawn to him. Every encounter, every decision felt like a balancing act between duty and desire. Her mind was constantly calculating, but her heart betrayed her with every glance, every touch, every unspoken acknowledgement of mutual attraction. One evening, as the city lights glittered beneath them, Minho approached her while she was reviewing files. "You're growing too predictable," he said softly, almost teasing. "I like it, but predictability can be dangerous. In this world, danger is everything." Amara met his gaze, steady but aware. "I'll adjust," she said, the words both a promise and a challenge. He smiled faintly, a dangerous, unreadable curve of his lips. "Good, because the next challenge will test everything about you." The following morning, Seoul's skyline glimmered in the early sunlight, but inside Amara's temporary suite, the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. She sat on the edge of the bed, still processing the chaos of the previous night, the rescue, the betrayal, and the intensity of Kang Minho's presence. Her hands rested in her lap, trembling slightly, though she wouldn't admit it. She had faced death, betrayal, and danger, but the way Kang Minho commanded the storm around him left a mark deeper than any physical wound. Her phone buzzed with a new message, medical test results for her mother. Relief washed over her, tempered by the knowledge that this victory came with strings attached. Kang Minho's deal had worked. Her mother was safe, treatment funded, but the debt lingered, invisible but undeniable. She took a deep breath and tried to focus, but a sudden dizziness made her clutch the edge of the bed. Her heart skipped, her stomach fluttered, not from fear this time, but from something entirely different. A small part of her mind whispered what she couldn't yet allow herself to admit. Her body was changing. By midday, the truth was undeniable. She was pregnant. Shock, confusion, and a flicker of joy warred with fear and calculation. Her mission, her life, her carefully crafted plan, all were suddenly entangled in a new reality. Kang Minho, the man she had been trained to resist, had left an indelible mark she could not erase. She thought back to the penthouse, to the quiet intensity of his gaze, the firm but controlled touch of his hands, the dangerous intimacy that had unfolded between them, and now the consequences of that intimacy had begun to manifest. When Minho arrived later that evening, the tension between them was electric. He had sensed the shift immediately, the subtle changes in her behavior, the slight hesitation in her step, the way her eyes darted to avoid his gaze. "You're distracted," he said quietly, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. "I notice everything." Amara inhaled, steadying herself. "I'm fine," she said, keeping her voice steady, though her mind raced with how to navigate the conversation. She couldn't reveal the full truth, not yet, not until she understood her own feelings. Minho stepped closer, eyes scanning her, reading the tension. Fine doesn't always mean safe, and distraction can be deadly in my world. "I can manage," she replied, her tone firm, but there was a subtle edge of vulnerability she couldn't hide. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he reached out and gently touched her arm. The contact sent a jolt through her, a dangerous, intoxicating reminder of their shared history and unspoken connection. "I've seen the results," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "I know what's happening." Her breath caught. "She do?" she asked, a mixture of alarm and awe in her voice. He nodded. "And I accept it. But understand this. This changes everything. Your mission, your choices, your life, mine too." Her chest tightened. She had expected judgment, anger, even threats, but not acceptance, not from him. And yet the weight of the situation was undeniable. The pregnancy intertwined their fates in ways neither could control. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again, a new alert. Cho Tae-yoon, a rival crime lord, had resurfaced, using the chaos of the past week to stake his claim. His message was clear and menacing: allegiance or loss. Amara's heart sank. This was no longer just about Minho, her mission, or her own survival. A new threat had emerged, testing loyalty, strategy, and trust. She knew she couldn't face this alone. Minho, ever vigilant, recognized the shift in her demeanor immediately. "He's dangerous," he said, eyes darkening, "and he's ambitious. I'll handle him, but you must be careful. Any misstep could be catastrophic." Amara nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. "I'll follow your lead," she admitted, her voice firm despite the fear curling in her stomach. Over the next few days, the tension escalated. Minho orchestrated a series of strategic moves to undermine Tae-yoon, while Amara navigated the delicate balance of maintaining her cover, protecting her mother, and managing the secret of her pregnancy. Each encounter with Minho grew more charged, more intimate, yet also more fraught with danger. One evening, as they reviewed intelligence reports together, Minho's hand brushed hers across the table, a fleeting touch, but it sent a jolt through her, a dangerous, intoxicating reminder of their shared history and unspoken connection. "You're changing," he said quietly, voice low, almost reverent, "and it's not just the mission, I see it in you." Amara swallowed, emotions churning. "I'm adapting," she said, the truth layered beneath her words. Minho leaned back slightly, studying her with a mixture of calculation and something softer, something she wasn't used to seeing in a man like him. "Good," he murmured, "because the world we're in doesn't forgive hesitation. But I see you, Amara, and I won't let anything happen to you, or the child." The weight of his words hit her. This was not just about attraction or strategy anymore. It was about protection, family, and an unspoken bond that had begun to form in the crucible of danger. The following day, she received another encrypted message from Morrison. His tone was urgent, almost desperate. "Cho Tae-yoon is escalating. Amara, you must choose allegiance. Minho is protecting you, but his world is dangerous. Do not underestimate him or the risks." Amara's chest tightened. The web of alliances, betrayals, and danger was tightening around her. Her mind raced, considering options, calculating risks, balancing loyalty and survival, and at the center of it all was Kang Minho, a man who inspired fear, fascination, and now a complicated, undeniable affection. That night, as Minho escorted her back to her suite, he paused in the car, eyes scanning the streets. "He's aggressive," he said quietly. "Tae-yoon doesn't play fair, and neither do I. But know this, I will protect you, always, and if anyone threatens what's ours, I will destroy them." Amara met his gaze, feeling the intensity, the promise, and the danger. I trust you," she admitted softly, though her mind remained alert, calculating. He exhaled slowly, a rare flicker of vulnerability crossing his expression. "Good. Trust is powerful, and right now we need it more than ever." As they arrived at her suite, the city lights casting reflections on the wet pavement, Amara felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. The stakes were never higher. Tae-yoon was out there, scheming, manipulating, ready to strike. Her mother's safety, her mission, and now her unborn child were all intertwined in a dangerous game that had no room for error. And yet, amidst the fear and danger, a flicker of something else emerged, a fragile, dangerous, exhilarating feeling, love. Not the naive, fleeting kind, but a deep, consuming force that had grown from tension, trust, and the shared crucible of survival. She knew that the next challenge would test everything, strategy, loyalty, and heart, and she also knew that Kang Minho, for all his ruthlessness and control, was no longer just an obstacle or a target. He was becoming the center of her world in ways she had never expected and could not yet resist. If you're hooked on this story and can't wait to see how danger, betrayal, and forbidden love unfold, subscribe, like, and comment now. The next chapter will reveal shocking secrets and heart-stopping confrontations you won't want to miss. The night air was thick with tension as Minho's convoy moved through Seoul's darkened streets. Rain slicked the pavement, reflecting the neon glow of the city, and every turn felt like a calculated risk. Amara sat in the back seat, her hands resting lightly on her lap, though the tension in her shoulders betrayed the storm inside her. Tae-yoon was a threat unlike any Minho had faced in years, ambitious, ruthless, and unpredictable. "You're tense," Minho observed, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the engine. He didn't look at her, eyes fixed on the road ahead, but his tone carried an edge of familiarity. "I have reason to be," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Tae-yoon is unpredictable. We don't know his next move." "And yet you trust me," he replied, glancing at her briefly, just enough to meet her gaze. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but there was an intensity there that made her stomach tighten. She swallowed, aware of the charge between them. "I have to," she admitted softly. "My mother's safety, everything depends on it." Minho's hand brushed against hers for a fleeting moment. She felt it before she registered it consciously, a spark, a warning, a thrill all at once. He didn't comment further, but the subtle contact carried meaning, trust, alliance, and perhaps something more dangerous. They arrived at Tae-yoon's designated meeting point, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Minho's team fanned out, silent and precise, surveying the perimeter. He motioned for Amara to stay back, but she stepped closer, instinct overriding hesitation. "Stay with me," he said, voice low. "We move together." Inside, the warehouse was a labyrinth of shadows. Tae-yoon's men were scattered, armed but unaware of the precise storm approaching them. Amara's training kicked in, every sense heightened, every movement deliberate. She followed Minho silently, moving as if part of his calculated rhythm. Tae-yoon emerged from the shadows, flanked by 2 lieutenants. His expression was smug, confident, almost theatrical. "Well, well," he said, voice dripping with mock admiration. "The great Kang Minho and his new associate. I've heard whispers, but seeing you here, unexpected." Minho's eyes narrowed. "I came for you," he said simply, "and I'll leave when this ends." Tae-yoon laughed, a low, dangerous sound that echoed through the warehouse. "Brave words, but you're in my territory now, and every move you make is visible to me. Everything you value, I can take." Amara felt the weight of the moment. Threats, power plays, and the danger of the unknown pressed in from all sides. Yet, alongside the fear, there was a pulse of adrenaline, a reminder that she was alive, capable, and deeply intertwined with a man who commanded every moment. Suddenly, Tae-yoon's men moved, a coordinated assault aimed at disrupting Minho's team. Chaos erupted, shadows clashing with precise strikes, the sound of gunfire and impact reverberating through the cavernous space. Amara's heart raced, training took over. She disarmed one man, pushed another to the ground, and ducked just in time to avoid a sudden swing. Through the chaos, Minho's eyes were everywhere, orchestrating, commanding, protecting. He moved with lethal precision, but never careless. Every move was calculated to ensure victory while safeguarding Amara and the people he cared about. When the dust settled, Tae-yoon lay subdued, bound and seething with rage. Minho's gaze fell on Amara, assessing, acknowledging. There was no need for words. The connection between them had deepened through danger, shared risk, and unspoken understanding. Later, back at the penthouse, Amara allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She sat alone, reviewing the events, thinking of her mother, her mission, and the man who had become central to her world. Minho approached, silent, yet his presence was overwhelming. "You're thinking too much," he said softly, sitting beside her. His hand hovered near hers, a subtle invitation. "You need to rest." "I can't," she admitted, voice low. "So much is at stake. I can't afford to be careless." He leaned closer, eyes shadowed, voice intimate. "Rest isn't weakness," he said. It's preparation, and you'll need all your strength for what comes next." Amara looked at him, the storm of emotions inside her, a mixture of fear, respect, attraction, and emerging admiration made her chest ache. "And what comes next?" she asked, voice almost a whisper. He smiled faintly, enigmatic and dangerous. "Revelation," he said, "truths you weren't prepared for, and choices that will define everything, your loyalty, your heart, your life." The following days were tense, layered with danger, strategy, and quiet observation. Amara noticed subtle hints in Minho's behavior, moments of reflection, flashes of emotion, and small acts of care that went unnoticed by others, but were impossible for her to ignore. One evening, while reviewing intelligence on Tae-yoon's remaining network, a confidential message arrived, this time revealing a secret that would shake the foundations of Amara's understanding of her own past. Morrison's notes confirmed what she had suspected, but hadn't dared fully believe. Her biological lineage tied her directly to influential figures within the criminal underworld. She was not merely an agent, she was part of a family she had never known, connected to power, loyalty, and danger in ways she hadn't imagined. Amara's hands shook. The mission, her mother, her own identity, everything collided. She realized that her life, her purpose, and the growing attachment to Minho were now intertwined with secrets that could change the balance of power entirely. Minho noticed her tension immediately. "You've discovered something," he said, quietly, voice low but commanding. "Yes, it's more than I expected. My past, my family, it's all connected." He reached out, placing a steadying hand on hers. "And now you understand," he said softly, "why I've been watching, why I've been testing you, because your world and mine, they are not separate anymore. They never were." She swallowed, the storm of emotions inside her making her chest ache. A mixture of fear, respect, attraction, and emerging love. And what does that mean? "It means," he said, voice low and measured, "that whatever comes next, we face it together. Betrayal, danger, family secrets, nothing changes that I will protect you and those you care about." The weight of his words pressed down on her, yet there was a strange comfort in them. Trust, once impossible, was slowly taking root. Love, once unthinkable, was emerging from the crucible of danger. As the city slept beneath them, the two sat together, each lost in thought, each aware of the invisible threads binding them together. Threads of blood, loyalty, danger, and a growing, undeniable bond that neither could ignore. The first rays of dawn spilled across Seoul, reflecting off the glass towers and bathing the city in a soft, golden light. Inside the penthouse, the world felt temporarily still, but Amara knew that peace was fragile. She had survived betrayal, danger, and tests of loyalty that had pushed her to the edge. And yet, as she sat beside Kang Minho, the weight of the past weeks settled into something heavier, something real, enduring, and terrifyingly beautiful. Minho watched her, eyes shadowed with concern and something deeper, something unspoken. "You're quiet this morning," he observed. "Thinking about the past or the future?" "Both," she admitted softly. Her fingers traced the edge of the table, mind replaying every moment. The handcuffs, the rescue, Tae-yoon's assault, her mother's safety, and the knowledge of her pregnancy. Each memory was a thread in the web of their shared life. Danger, passion, trust, and love intertwined beyond her control. He leaned back, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. "The future is ours to shape," he said, voice low but firm. "But it requires choices, commitment, and courage." Amara met his gaze. Courage she had learned to rely on. Commitment, that was something new. Love, That was something she hadn't expected to feel, yet could no longer deny. Days turned into weeks as Minho began the careful process of dismantling his empire. The criminal operations that had controlled Seoul's underworld for years were transferred to legitimate businesses, quietly, methodically. Amara assisted, both as an advisor and as a partner, balancing the intricacies of the transition while navigating the subtle, charged intimacy that had developed between them. The pregnancy progressed, and with it a new layer of connection and vulnerability. Minho's protective instincts intensified, but he allowed her space, respecting her strength and intelligence. It was a delicate dance, love intertwined with strategy, emotion balanced with practicality. One evening, as they reviewed plans for a new business venture, Amara paused, glancing at Minho. "Do you ever regret everything?" she asked softly, voice tentative. "The empire, the battles, the chaos?" He considered her, eyes distant yet anchored on her presence. "Regret isn't in my nature," he said finally. "I've lived in shadows, controlled life through fear and respect. But everything I've done led me to this moment, to you, to our future." Amara's chest tightened. The words carried weight, acknowledgement, vulnerability, and promise. She had never imagined that love could exist in the midst of such chaos, that trust could emerge from danger, that a man like Kang Minho could become the center of her world. The months passed, and the twins arrived, a delicate, miraculous balance of life and love amidst the echoes of violence they had endured. Mina and Sora, small, fragile yet alive, brought a softness into their lives that neither Amara nor Minho had anticipated. The penthouse, once a fortress of strategy and surveillance, now carried laughter, cries, and the rhythm of family. Minho held the twins in his arms, eyes shadowed yet tender. "We protect them," he said softly, voice almost reverent. "Everything else comes second." Amara watched him, heart full. She had faced betrayal, danger, and loss, yet here he was, ruthless, commanding, dangerous, and utterly devoted. Love had found a way, even in the darkest corners of their world. As time passed, Amara learned more about her own lineage, reconciling the revelations about Morrison and her biological heritage. The past, once tangled with deceit and manipulation, now became part of the foundation on which they built their new life. Loyalty, family, and love were no longer theoretical. They were living, breathing, unbreakable. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Minho turned to her, eyes intense. "Do you ever think about the life we might have had if none of this had happened?" Amara smiled softly, leaning against him. "I think about the life we have now, and I wouldn't change it, not even the pain, not even the danger, because it brought me to you." He exhaled slowly, tension leaving his shoulders. "Good," he murmured, "because I choose us, always." Their marriage followed quietly but meaningfully, a ceremony blending cultures, friends, and family forged from loyalty and respect. Minho's empire was no longer a tool of fear, but a foundation for legitimate business, philanthropy, and community influence. Amara, once an agent sent to destroy him, became his partner in every sense, emotionally, strategically, and intimately. The twins grew, their laughter filling the penthouse, while the first hints of a third child, their son, added new joy and expectation. The past was not forgotten, but it no longer controlled them. Kang Minho, once a kingpin of fear, had transformed through love and family. Amara, once a solitary agent of precision, had found a partner who challenged, protected, and adored her. One night, as the city lights glittered beneath them, Minho held her close. "Everything you've survived, everything we've faced, it was worth it, because it brought us here, to this life, to our family." Amara leaned against him, feeling the steady strength beneath his exterior, the tenderness hidden in a man the world feared. "It was worth it," she whispered, "and I wouldn't trade a single moment." Minho kissed her forehead, a simple gesture loaded with history, emotion, and promise. "We'll face whatever comes next," he said quietly, "together, always." And in that moment, the chaos of Seoul, the betrayals, the battles, and the danger faded into the background. What remained was trust, love, family, and a future built not on fear, but on devotion and redemption. If you've been captivated by Amara and Kang Minho's journey from danger to love, betrayal to family, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Share your favorite moment, and stay tuned for more thrilling stories that blend suspense, romance, and heart-stopping action.